Why should we protest against the Deutsche Bundesbank?
The last time I stood here with a sign, the sign said, we need limited money for limited resources. I don't have a full-time job. I became pretty unemployable through my actions already.
You seem to be like a lone fighter, and I respect lone fighters a lot. Do you consider yourself a lone fighter or not really?
I mean, sometimes, yeah, of course. I feel misunderstood from many people. I feel kind of misunderstood in the environmental movement as well as in Bitcoin movement sometimes as well. I believe the most fundamental and most important strategic Bitcoin reserve is your personal strategic Bitcoin reserve.
So we're here at the Deutsche Bundesbank. I know you protest a lot of, you do a lot of protests in front of central banks. Did you ever protest here before?
In front of this bank? Yeah,
you did?
2 times actually already. Like last time was on Friday. I was just here for a photo session. I didn't stay here for long, but I think I spent 1 Saturday for Satoshi here.
A whole Saturday?
Like, yeah, up to 21 blocks. So
okay. So that would be 21 times 10 minutes approximately.
Yeah. Like, I do it every Saturday up to 21 blocks. Like, not each Saturday 21 blocks. 1 block is already enough. But yeah, 21 blocks is about 3.5 hours, I guess. So yeah.
So that's your typical protest session, yes?
Yes.
Okay, interesting. And you do it a lot. I saw a lot of videos of you in front of the central bank, usually alone, right? Or do you also do that with other people together?
So I organized this protest to be as decentralized and permissionless as possible. Because when you do a public protest, when you're 2 people, you need to ask permission from the government or the city to voice political opinions. When you're alone, you can do it anytime, anywhere, because it's a different law.
Okay.
So that's why I designed it that way.
Care about the law?
I try to design it to be as you know, for people to, it should be very easy for people to join in. There shouldn't be much risk involved. And every time you do a protest and you need to ask permission, that's kind of not the Bitcoin vibe, not the Bitcoin ethos. So I thought instead of 100 people in front of 1 bank, let's just do 100 different banks and 1 person each, because I think it has even a stronger signal, because imagine a city like Berlin, there are probably 300, 400 banks here. We have a couple of Bitcoiners in Berlin. If each Bitcoiner would go and take 1 bank every Saturday, I think the city would be very aware of these weird people sitting in front of banks. Yeah,
they are funny. And why should we protest against the Deutsche Bundesbank?
Well, I'm not sure what your target audience is, but I assume they're Bitcoiners, and we Bitcoiners...
Everyone.
Or other people. Yeah, I think we're pretty aware that our current monetary system is not producing the best outcomes for society. So we're having infinite amount of money printing, which is stealing time and energy from hardworking people through inflation. And for me personally, I have this more environmental and ecological aspect to it, that I believe that infinite amounts of money can never match a finite amount of resources. So the last time I stood here with a sign, the sign said, we need limited money for limited resources.
Yeah, understand. And is it a full-time job, or is it something you do every Saturday?
It's something that I do every Saturday that I one day hope to become my full-time job as a Bitcoin activist.
Yeah, because that's what I wondered. I thought, do you have a job or is that your full-time job? But it's still on the side, let's say.
I don't have a full-time job. I became pretty unemployable through my actions already.
Okay.
What does that? Yeah, I mean, you know, it's deflationary money, and I get some donations here and there for my actions. So I think long-term I'm doing fine, and short-term I'm just following my passion, which is raising awareness towards this topic.
Absolutely, but I mean, you need food, you need shelter. That works out so far without having a job.
I mean, yeah, you know, like when you're in the activism scene, you get to know a lot of people, and there are friends in every city I am who are willing to host me, or yeah, we get some food together, and it works. I'm surviving.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. You seem to be like a lone fighter, and I respect lone fighters a lot because, yeah, they're just standing up against the mainstream. And do you consider yourself a lone fighter or not really?
I mean, sometimes, yeah, of course. I feel misunderstood from many people. I feel kind of misunderstood in the environmental movement as well as in Bitcoin movement sometimes as well, because Bitcoiners, they're like, well, it's all about privacy. Why are you so open about it? Or
about what?
Why are you so open about promoting Bitcoin? Like, there are some Bitcoiners who are like, I would never do that in front of a central bank or another bank because I care about my OPSEC too much, which I respect. But
OPSEC is, you have to explain that.
Operational security.
Okay.
So it's like privacy. Yeah. If you're a hardcore hacker working on Bitcoin, there could be some risks involved with that from government authorities and stuff. I mean, I respect that, but for the everyday Bitcoiner who has a family of 3 or, I don't know, does a Fiat job, I believe we can just go out and voice our opinions into the public and into the collective consciousness.
Yeah, I deal with that subject a lot as well, because I'm also openly talking about Bitcoin, and a lot of Bitcoiners are very much into privacy. But then, for example, they don't want to be filmed on events, and at the same time they bring their mobile phones. So I often think, what privacy is it? I prefer more privacy towards the state, not necessarily towards other normal people that could maybe recognize you on YouTube. But yeah, it is a big topic, and I know you also talk about subjects like climate crisis, and you're a vegan, is that correct?
Yeah, I consider myself freegan. So freegan is like, I don't put any economic demand towards animal-based protein products. But if I go containering, like if I go to the shops and pick up stuff from the trash and they're not vegan, I would eat them because there's no economic demand behind them.
Okay, interesting. Because in the community, you have carnivores. I myself also tried the carnivore diet. So in that community, you may also be sometimes the lone wolf, right?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah. And how is that? I mean, like with regards to climate change or like man-made climate change, what is your perception? What do Bitcoiners usually think? They're more critical normally, or?
Well, I think you have to separate. So there's the IPCC. It's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change.
Yeah.
And they have 3 parts or 3 teams. The first team is just looking at the hard sciences: maths, physics, chemistry, biology. What is happening on our planet? There's measurable data like CO2 particles in the air that is rising. We can measure that. We can be pretty sure that there's a greenhouse effect and stuff. Then group 2 of the IPCC is working with sensitivity analysis. So they are trying to look what kind of actions or how much impact does each sector have towards the overall outcome. And then group 3 is actually proclaiming government actions. So what should governments throughout the world do to mitigate this crisis? And I believe that Bitcoiners and anarchists who are very critical of the state, they're exceptionally fearful of part 3. So they're like, it's a narrative to suppress the individual and force rules upon us to not eat meat and all this stuff. I'm very critical of this part of the IPCC as well, but that doesn't mean that I do not consider the physics part as true and real and dangerous towards the flourishing of human society in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have to say I'm not very deep into that subject, but of course it's a very popular subject, and it just personally reminds me a lot of what happened during the COVID crisis. So I personally see a lot of possibility for behavioral control, for implementing taxes, for not really having an open debate because science says so and all critics are not really being heard, and that's why I see parallels, and that's why I'm actually quite critical as well. Mm-hmm. And do you see that also in that? I mean, are critics really being heard? Because you have scientists who say it's not really the case, or we don't really have. We had hotter times in the past, or you know, I grew up. Yeah. I grew up in a time where the ozone layer was still a big issue. So I probably a bit older than you. So for me, I was in fear to be out in the sun, and they said the hole is getting bigger and bigger, and it's going to be a big problem. And since like 15, 20 years, you don't hear anything about it anymore.
Because there was a sufficient action taken, actually, in 1991, the Montreal Accord banned these kind of gases which were used in hairspray. So there is an international ban on these, so no more emissions.
Hairspray was responsible for the ozone layer holes?
Yeah, so there was a special type of gas. It's like CFCs, or it's like chlorofluorimic acids, or I'm not sure. Like, you can look it up. But these types of chemicals bonded to ozone within the atmosphere, and kind of through chemistry it changed into another thing, and that's why the ozone layer kept growing. And then the international community came together and were like, well, ozone is pretty important for survival of humanity on this planet, so we should get together and reach consensus that we shouldn't use these gases in our industries anymore because they are endangering our future. So let's just use other gases instead, because hairspray still exists today. It's just used by a different kind of gas.
Okay, yeah, okay, interesting.
That's why you don't hear about it anymore.
You think so?
I believe.
Yeah, I cannot verify or deny that. So interesting, maybe something to look into.
Please verify. Please verify if what I said was true or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And in general, don't you think there's a problem with science? Because since COVID, I became extremely critical, and I just see a lot of like real experts being excluded from the debate. You never hear them. You never, and you on television, which I usually don't look anyway. You have this selected panel of people who basically just confirm a certain narrative, or corridor of opinion that isn't really open debate. And
I don't think there's a problem with science itself. I think there's a problem with science communication, and maybe there is a problem with funding of science, like the incentive structure underlying scientific research and how to get grants is pretty political, but this works for both political sides actually. So we see that currently in the US they're proclaiming this woke mind virus which overtook academia and turned everything more trans ideology and stuff. But we're now actually seeing political action forcing back science in specific areas of research, and I believe that science should be an open field, an open conquest to gather new information and knowledge about what all of this is.
Yeah, it's firing back indeed. But don't you see? Don't you also understand that part? I mean, I used to live for 9 years in a very left-leaning housing project here, and so I had to deal with gender professors on a regular basis, and I became very critical actually.
Okay.
Because I think it's not necessarily based in reality. My voice is going. And for example, I don't think it helps inclusion. So it also is a lot about you either conform to that's ideology, I would even say, or you are being excluded. I even went to a trans demonstration and I asked, how important is it to accept someone's gender identity? And then they said, yeah, it's very important, and I agree, and I'm fully for that. And then I asked, how important is it if someone does not identify as a Nazi to also accept that? And immediately the conversation was finished, and they wanted to throw me off the demonstration, called me a Nazi, called me a conspiracy theorist. So I don't see the inclusion part really working out so far. Do you see that as well?
I mean, this is what ideology is, right? So ideology basically is groupthink in a way. Everybody believes in the same stuff, and we're not open anymore to new information that contradicts our ideology because it actually threatens ourselves. Because if we're the only person in a group who doesn't believe in what everybody else is believing, you're kind of vulnerable towards the group itself, and you feel like a lone wolf or lone warrior. And most people, just from their psyche, are not primed to endure this kind of psychological pain to stand up for themselves, to believe in what they think is right, and to be okay with that. I feel like many Bitcoiners should be more confident in proclaiming their views, even if it contradicts some of the Bitcoin groupthink ideology.
But are, in general, Bitcoiners a step ahead compared to the general society?
No.
Don't you think? Yeah, maybe not.
Regarding to money, yes. Regarding to other problems, definitely not.
Yeah. There was just a point I wanted to talk about. Oh yeah, but let's say I'm totally for someone identifying as something, but when you look at sports, do you think it's a good idea to have biological male competing in women's MMA, for example, mixed martial arts. What do you think about that?
So, on transgender topics, I'm not very well read, so I cannot talk much about it, but I can refer the listeners and viewers to ContraPoints. It's a YouTube channel, and she's a transgender woman. I think she has a very diverse view on this. She tries to get people into it, and I feel like with everything, with every ideology, it's most people, they care about...
So you call it an ideology?
Yeah, like everything is kind of ideology. Ideology is kind of based on belief systems. And Bitcoin is an ideology, Fiat is an ideology, anarchism is an ideology, statism is an ideology. Everything is kind of an ideology. But I believe what people are most pushy or hesitant about, or where they feel that defensiveness, is when they feel that a certain ideology is pushed upon them. You feel that when you're trying to orange pill your friends and family. They're getting really defensive because they feel like it's not their ideas themselves that have grown and developed over time, but it's pushed upon them from you because you want to act them a certain way. Most people, like, we have good intentions, like why do people who eat meat get very passively aggressive towards vegans? It's because many think that vegans would want to push their ideology upon them, which some do. There are.
Most of them, maybe?
I'm not sure. I think it's part of the process, actually. It's part of the awareness stage. Like, when I became vegan, there was a time where I tried to push everybody to become vegan as well. Then I realized, well, it doesn't work that way. You have to just live it and plant a seed into other people's heads, and if they feel inspired and are willing to change their behavior on themselves, it works sustainably. So it works in the long term, and I feel it's the same with Bitcoin as well. Like, I had times where I tried to push this idea down people's throats, but over time I learned, well, it's not that easy, although I want the best for my fellow citizens.
Yeah.
So I believe it's kind of the same, and I feel that many people who are very critical of this gender ideology, they feel kind of pushed to adopt it, and they don't have the certain pull, like intrinsic pull, to try and put themselves into the other people's position. Because I think everybody who thinks that they themselves could be a transgender and just emulate this worldview, and I think then everybody would be more open to debate with them, because to come back to come back to your question, should transgender people be able to do sports? Definitely, yes. Are there regulations on professional sports? Yes. Will we reach consensus on how to mitigate this field? I believe so.
Yeah, but the question was, should they be able, like a biological man identifying as a woman, should he be able to compete in women's sports? And an extreme example is mixed martial arts. And we had examples where jaws were broken, or in boxing. And I think no, because there is still a physical difference, and it doesn't do good to the women, you know. They're losing to, let's say, in men's sport, our average athletes that now compete with women, which I don't think is fair.
So would you think that Bitcoiners should be able to work in banks and compete with bankers? Because I think that's not really fair.
What do you mean by that?
I think it's actually the same in a certain way. Like,
no.
Why not?
Because there's just simply a biological difference. So you have more upper body strength as a biological male that identifies as a woman, and I don't think it's helpful to just completely blur the differences, because there are some, and there was, I mean, the movement which is called woke, which I do have some issues with, pushed towards like completely making no difference between transsexual women and women. But I think there are differences, and we should be able to point at them. And one example is, for example, women's sport. And if I can just say tomorrow I'm a woman and I have access to a women's shelter or to the women's bathroom, I'm not sure if that's going to turn out well in the long run. You know what I mean?
I'm pretty sure that going through a gender transition is a very long process, a very energy-intensive process, and so there are many people pointing out that there would be people who would do this to gain an advantage, like men who are going through a transition to harass women in bathrooms or in women housing.
There's a recent example of a right-wing extremist who used to call queer people like scum, and now he was sentenced to 2 years prison, and before the prison he just turned himself into a woman to get into the women prison. So I think these examples will become more, and I don't think it's going to be very helpful. And I also see there's a lot about diversity, where you try to look that there's enough women, enough foreigners, enough cultures mixed, an equal mix in companies, in the government, wherever, and we forget that this is only the packaging, and the diversity of thought is probably more important. And I see this becoming more like different colors supporting the same ideology, if you understand what I mean.
I'm not sure if I would agree on this, because I definitely believe that there are different thoughts, like or different realities that people live through with a migration background, a migration history, or if they're black, or if they're gay or lesbian, or if they're a woman. And I believe that these thoughts and voices and realities should be represented in power structures. Although I personally would say we should try to boil down all the power structures in a society that exists, because I believe.
But do you think black people go along with one sort of experience? Because that's what I...
No, everybody is different.
Exactly.
But I for myself, certainly cannot represent the life experiences of a black person as good as a black person can. Because I am not, and...
I understand. It's a very critical point, but because once you say, okay, we cannot, I believe that a white person can identify much better with a black person than maybe another black person. And because once we say a black person has its own experience. We're ending up with racism. You know what I mean? I recently talked to a guy from the Dritte Weg, and he's considered a real right-wing extremist, and he has Aryan Hope tattooed on his head. And I asked, you want to support German families? What do you mean by that? I was born here, I don't have a German passport. Who's German, who's not? And he said, yeah, it has to be according to German ethnicity, Abstammungsprinzip.
Yeah.
And that basically is relatively similar, because he believes German ethnicity also shares a certain worldview, but he forgets that German ethnicity is to a large part Antifa or left-wing people he would not be able to come to a deal with, you know. So I think it's also relatively dangerous to just say they all have their own experience, and we cannot really share that or identify with that, you know, or racism is only there for black people, but not for for white people. That's already a racist statement in itself. You know what I mean?
I'm not sure if I would agree with this, because there certainly exist structural inequalities.
Sure, absolutely.
And I think becoming aware of them is hard, and basically, like, what it boils down to in the end is everybody is kind of suffering from the same system, and everybody is pointing fingers at other people because they are making everything worse. But I believe that the step after pointing at other people who make it worse, the next step is pointing in the mirror and looking at yourself. And then the third step would be, well, actually, the world is based on your mental projection. And if I choose to be a peaceful individual and love my fellow human beings as compassionately as I can, then the world will change.
Yeah, sounds good. We were drifting off a little bit. We're going to talk about probably also Bitcoin and central banks. So, do you see Bitcoin solving these issues, or what do you think Bitcoin can fundamentally solve in society?
Well, Bitcoin is first of all for me a technology to opt out. It's just there. It exists, and people can adopt this kind of ideology voluntarily when they feel that they are stuck in their lives, when they feel that the path they're currently taking in their lives is not leading towards a desired outcome. And then when you have this realization within your life, you're starting to look for different paths, other paths. And I believe that Bitcoin being there, offering an alternative, is extremely valuable, and more people will pick up this path eventually.
Mm-hmm. We met at the Bitcoin im Bundestag event, right, where Samson Ma was speaking.
Yes.
And you had a few very good and critical questions. What do you think about institutions, governments now adopting Bitcoin? What's your view on that?
I believe the most fundamental and most important strategic Bitcoin reserve is your personal strategic Bitcoin reserve, because no governments are acting altruistically. Like, governments are not there to help you. They are there to help themselves stay alive. They're systems, and systems want to stay alive. So it's if they want to stay alive, it's very logical for them to adopt Bitcoin or at least figure this stuff out. But I personally would like to see change from the bottom up and not from top down, because I actually want to help people and not institutions to stay alive. So the path Samson is going, I don't believe that it's the path to help individuals, but to help institutions and powerful people. So
yeah, I mean, I wish I wrote an article, "Jump in before the whales do," some years ago, and that's what I see right now is not really happening. So now institutions get into Bitcoin. I would prefer that normal people would get into it first.
Yeah,
which probably they won't do. So maybe it is at the end a catalyst where the price will draw them into it again, and it's also a bit about legitimacy. But I understand that you should be critical, absolutely.
I think we're at a point where so some people, they're really curious about new ideas. So they go out, and when they see new ideas, they look deeply into them, study them, and then maybe adopt them into their lives. I think we've hit the inflection point with Bitcoin already, and we're now at a phase where people will start following people instead of ideas, because figuring out the ideas is very hard. But if you have certain individuals that you like and trust and think they're doing a good job, then people will start following and matching your behavior, basically. So this is why I believe that now is a very important time to create this social movement of Bitcoin, this bottom-up movement, like Saturdays for Satoshi, for Bitcoiners to just be out there, be present for their fellow citizens. It's not forcing onto them, but just an invitation to speak about it. Like, my protests, they're very passive. I'm not handing out flyers everywhere. I'm just sitting there having my message. If people are interested, they come speak with me. If not, okay, you go past.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we probably all had our phases in orange pilling people and also disappointments. So probably at the end, that's the best approach, to offer conversations, offer to bring information, but not force it upon people, because it does not seem to work. It didn't work with me either.
It's Satoshi's way, actually.
Yeah.
Because Satoshi, he just published this idea to a mailing list, and it was public, and he was just, whoever vibes with it, and I'm fine with it. And I believe many Bitcoiners, they're like, they have a selection bias, you know? They look into their community and their network, and they're like, okay, which of these people could I orange pill? Like, who has the certain mindset? And through this selection bias, I think it's actually very hard for them, because now they're emotionally invested, and it's kind of a failure if I don't get to orange pill this person. It's something that I do wrong or anything. Yeah. So that's why I say, skip the selection bias, just be like Satoshi, go out into the public with your message, and just be there and vibe it. And whoever comes, comes. You cannot pick your fighters, but there will be people who will be very grateful for your presence. Because every Saturday I meet people who are approaching me and who are curious to find out about it. And then it's not fighting against windmills, but they're there with open arms and curiosity and interest, and they're very grateful. So, yeah,
amazing.
You should join. You should do it.
Yeah, I would love to. Yeah, but usually not in Berlin. But I would love to join. If you're in Berlin or if I'm somewhere near you, for sure.
Yeah.
Sounds very interesting, absolutely. I'm a bit afraid that it starts to rain.
Yeah.
Which my cameras will not, at least one will not really survive.
Yes.
I remember you said that you put your passport in a blender.
Yes.
Could you explain just briefly why?
Well, with Bitcoin, the idea or the ideology of nation states becomes more and more obsolete the longer you are in Bitcoin, because suddenly you realize you can transact with every human being on the whole planet without permission, and then we have this. I think in public, in collective consciousness, there is this utopia of a borderless planet, you know, a planet without borders, with people exchanging goods and services peacefully and voluntarily, and I think Bitcoin can do that. So in order to get there, it's just upon us to take action and do it. So that's why I did it.
Great. But property rights play a role in that utopia?
Sure. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Interesting. And you got into the Bundestag despite not having a passport. How did you do that?
I have a driver's license.
Okay,
still,
so that's your way of identifying yourself if you have to. Is that right?
Yeah, kind of. Because otherwise, there are certain kinds of people who, if you don't have any kind of identification, it's like error 404 bug. Like their whole system shuts down into panic mode because suddenly I'm somewhat dangerous, I guess.
Yep.
I don't know.
Yeah, interesting. And what's your plans for the future? What are you going to do next weekend? Where are you going to protest?
I'm going to go to Frankfurt on Thursday because the European Governing Council is meeting up there. So it's all the central bankers coming together to debate monetary policy. And since these meetings shouldn't happen without people protesting against it or voicing a way to opt out, I have to be there. Because nobody else is doing it currently, but
respect.
Yeah, long term, there will be a huge Bitcoin movement, I believe. It needs to be bottom up to be successful. We saw that in El Salvador.
Yeah. Well, yeah, El Salvador is a bit tragic, also, I think, because.
Well, it's just. I mean, it's logical because it's top down. True. People hate the government.
So we didn't really see it in El Salvador then, the bottom up, because it was top down, and now it's actually what's left. A lot of dissatisfied people. I have the feeling.
Yeah, there are some Bitcoin influencers who are, I don't know, like, this is what currently really annoys me about Bitcoin, is all this grifting towards politicians and powerful people to try to orange pill them to go for a strategic Bitcoin reserve and all this stuff. No. It's a people's movement. It's us. It's individuals. It's the plebs. And if it's truly a pleb movement, we need to behave like plebs and not like some blown up. We know everything now because we're rich and we're Bitcoiners. Now we can talk to the powerful shit shows and become exactly the same as they are. I got to drop
first drops. Well, I think that was a good finish. Thank you so much for your effort. I have a lot of respect for what you're doing, and we'll probably see each other on a conference, or maybe I'll join you some day when it's possible.
Yeah, sure.
So
just just try it out.
Okay.
You said you have a
now
chair.
It's raining. I have to stop.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Great. Ja, die hält das nicht aus.
Ja.